Humanity had spent generations reaching beyond Earth. What had started with small colonies on nearby worlds had slowly turned into a network of settlements spread across several star systems. Life was not perfect, but people had learned how to adapt. Farmers worked under artificial skies. Engineers maintained massive stations floating above distant planets. Families built new homes far away from the world where their ancestors had once lived. Most people no longer thought about first contact. For decades, scientists had searched for signs of intelligent life, but nothing had ever appeared. Many believed humanity was alone in the galaxy. That belief ended without warning. Deep inside a monitoring station located near the edge of human territory, operators noticed something strange. At first, they thought it was a sensor problem. A few unusual signals had appeared where empty space should have been. The readings were too organized to be natural, but they also did not match any known human technology. As more systems focused on the area, the truth slowly became impossible to ignore. Something was there. Not one ship. Not 10 ships. An entire fleet. The discovery spread quickly through military channels. Emergency reports were sent to nearby colonies. Scientists and analysts worked around the clock trying to understand what they were seeing. No one had expected humanity's first encounter with another civilization to happen this way. What worried everyone most was the size of the formation. Thousands of objects moved together with perfect precision. Their movements showed discipline and coordination that could only belong to an advanced species. Whoever they were, they had crossed enormous distances to reach this region of space. On Earth and across the colonies, people watched the news with nervous curiosity. Schools paused classes. Workers gathered around screens. Families discussed possibilities over dinner tables. Some hoped these visitors had come in peace. Others feared something far worse. Unknown to humanity, the fleet had been studying human civilization for years. Hidden probes had quietly observed colonies and collected information. Alien scientists had spent decades analyzing human history, technology, and behavior. Their conclusions had been simple. Humans were considered interesting, but not dangerous. According to their reports, humanity was divided, emotional, and technologically behind. The alien commanders believed they were dealing with a young civilization that would offer little resistance if conflict ever became necessary. Confidence filled every level of the fleet. Their empire had expanded for centuries. They had encountered many species before, and none had posed a serious threat. Experience had taught them to trust their calculations. Before making contact, however, standard procedure required a complete scan of the target civilization. The process was routine, or at least it was supposed to be. Powerful sensor arrays activated across the fleet. Streams of information poured into their systems. Advanced programs examined human industry, military production, communication networks, and historical archives. At first, everything appeared normal. Then strange results started appearing. The first analysts assumed there had been errors. Some of the information simply did not make sense. Their systems showed military facilities that had never been expected. Old battle records appeared in databases where none should have existed. Long-abandoned regions contained evidence of enormous construction projects. Confused technicians reran the scans. The results became even stranger. One report suggested that humanity possessed far more ships than previous estimates had indicated. Another revealed reserve fleets hidden across distant systems. Some vessels appeared inactive, while others were impossible to classify. Senior officers ordered verification immediately. Perhaps the sensors were malfunctioning. Perhaps cosmic interference had damaged the readings. Perhaps someone had entered incorrect information. But every new scan produced the same answers. Inside the fleet's command centers, confidence slowly turned into confusion. Experienced officers began asking uncomfortable questions. Why had their previous intelligence missed so much? How could so many facilities exist without being detected? And why did human records contain signs of repeated rebuilding efforts? The historical data disturbed several researchers. Human civilization had suffered disasters, wars, economic collapses, natural catastrophes, political divisions. Yet every time humanity had been knocked down, it had somehow recovered. Not only recovered, it had continued expanding. To many alien observers, this pattern was difficult to understand. Other civilizations often weakened after major crises. Some never fully recovered. Humans seemed different. Their history looked messy and chaotic. But hidden inside that chaos was something unusual. Persistence. Again and again, they had survived situations that should have ended their progress. One scientist studying ancient records found evidence of conflicts that had devastated entire regions of Earth centuries earlier. Another discovered periods where resources had become scarce, yet innovation had increased instead of collapsing. None of this matched their expectations. Several analysts dismissed these findings. Survival alone did not make a species dangerous, but others were becoming less certain. As additional scans continued, even stranger discoveries emerged. Industrial centers spread across multiple systems. Mining operations larger than expected. Construction yards capable of producing enormous vessels. Some installations had been inactive for years, but many could become operational again if needed. The information raised serious concerns. Had humanity been intentionally hiding its capabilities? Or had the alien empire simply underestimated them from the beginning? The debate spread through the fleet. Lower-ranking crews noticed unusual activity among their superiors. Meetings became longer. Security restrictions increased. Technical teams worked nonstop. Rumors started appearing. People whispered about impossible numbers. Some claimed the scans had uncovered secret weapons. Others believed humanity possessed technology nobody had anticipated. Wild stories spread from ship to ship. Most were exaggerated, but uncertainty itself began affecting morale. Confidence, once taken for granted, started showing cracks. A respected strategist requested a complete review of the data. He had served for hundreds of years and had participated in numerous campaigns. Rarely had he questioned intelligence reports. This time was different. Something felt wrong. Not because the humans appeared stronger than expected, but because the mistakes were too large. Entire categories of information had been overlooked. Such failures were almost unheard of. Additional sensor platforms were deployed. Fresh scans examined different frequencies and methods. The fleet's most advanced computers analyzed everything again. Hours turned into days. The answers remained unchanged. Humanity's picture grew larger and more complicated with every new report. The commanders found themselves facing a possibility they disliked. Maybe their assumptions had been wrong from the beginning. Meanwhile, ordinary people throughout human space continued their daily lives. Children attended schools. Cargo pilots transported supplies. Doctors treated patients. Farmers managed food production on distant colonies. Most had no idea that far away, another civilization was questioning everything it believed about them. For humanity, survival had never been simple. Generations had struggled, adapted, and rebuilt. Not because they expected alien observers. Not because they wanted to impress anyone. They had simply done what humans always did. They kept moving forward. Back inside the fleet, tension increased. Senior officers gathered around projections displaying endless streams of information. Arguments became more frequent. Some believed caution was necessary. Others insisted the reports were being exaggerated. After all, they still possessed superior technology and centuries of experience. But confidence was no longer absolute. Doubt had entered the room, and doubt spread quickly. One technician quietly admitted that the scans frightened him, not because they showed a perfect civilization. In fact, the opposite was true. Human history appeared filled with mistakes, conflicts, and hardships. Yet somehow, that imperfect species had endured. Another researcher reached a similar conclusion. Humans seemed unpredictable, and unpredictability was dangerous. No computer model could fully explain how they reacted under pressure. No historical pattern followed clean rules. The more they learned, the less certain they became. By the end of the week, rumors had spread across nearly every ship. Crew members who had once spoken confidently about the mission now exchanged nervous looks. Questions replaced assumptions, and assumptions had been the foundation of their confidence. Finally, after reviewing hundreds of reports, the highest commanders agreed on one thing. This situation could no longer be treated as routine. An emergency meeting was called. Every major leader in the fleet received orders to attend. The atmosphere throughout the Armada changed overnight. No celebrations, no speeches about easy victories, only silence. Because for the first time since entering human space, the commanders were forced to confront a disturbing possibility. They might not understand humanity at all. And that realization alone was beginning to shake an entire fleet. The emergency meeting began in complete silence. Hundreds of senior officers appeared through secure communication channels, while others sat inside the fleet's largest command vessel. The atmosphere felt different from every meeting they had held before. Normally, discussions focused on expansion, diplomacy, or strategy. Confidence was always present. This time, nobody looked confident. Everyone had received the same reports. Everyone had seen the same scans. And everyone knew something was wrong. The first group of analysts presented their findings once again. Massive images appeared above the conference floor. Star maps, industrial centers, and historical records filled the room. No one interrupted. The information had already been checked dozens of times. The numbers remained unchanged. Human civilization was much larger and far more complicated than anyone had believed. One officer suggested that perhaps humanity had intentionally hidden its capabilities. Another disagreed. The hidden facilities stretched back centuries. Some of them had been constructed long before the alien empire had even started observing Earth. That answer created even more concern. If humans had not been hiding their strength, then the only explanation left was far worse. The fleet had completely misunderstood them. For an empire that prided itself on knowledge and precision, such a mistake was difficult to accept. Several scientists then focused on human history. That presentation changed the mood inside the room. Ancient records showed periods filled with uncertainty and hardship. There had been times when humanity had struggled with shortages, disasters, and internal conflicts. Entire nations had disappeared. Economies had collapsed. Dangerous events had tested civilization again and again. Yet humans always adapted. Some periods of crisis had actually pushed technology forward faster. During difficult years, people had discovered new solutions. Communities had rebuilt. Scientists had created new inventions. Ordinary citizens had found ways to survive. The analysts found that strange. Most species preferred stability. Humans seemed to evolve through pressure. The more difficult life became, the more creative they appeared. That pattern made predictions almost impossible. One elderly strategist finally spoke. He had spent centuries studying wars and civilizations. His experience was respected across the empire. "What troubles me," he explained calmly, "is not what humans have become. What troubles me is what they become when challenged." The room remained silent. Nobody argued with him, because every report pointed toward the same conclusion. Humans rarely stayed the same. They changed. They learned. They improved. And no one knew where their limits truly were. Additional simulations were presented. These computer models examined possible futures. Some scenarios involved peaceful contact. Others examined trade relations. A few looked at military tensions. The results surprised everyone. The machines struggled to predict human behavior accurately. In one simulation, humans cooperated peacefully. In another, they reorganized entire industries within months. In several models, they developed solutions faster than expected. Small variables created huge differences. Their flexibility confused even the most advanced systems. One researcher admitted something that shocked the room. "Our computers understand stars better than they understand humans." No one laughed, because it was true. As the meeting continued, strange stories began reaching senior commanders. Rumors had spread throughout the fleet. Crew members were talking. Engineers discussed unusual discoveries. Pilots exchanged theories during breaks. Technicians whispered inside maintenance sections. Everyone seemed to have heard something different. Some believed humanity possessed secret weapons. Others thought ancient machines protected Earth. A few imagined hidden alliances with unknown species. Most of these stories were ridiculous. But fear had a strange effect. When answers were missing, imagination filled the empty spaces. Even experienced officers found themselves wondering what else they might have missed. Meanwhile, life inside human space remained normal. Families celebrated birthdays. Students worried about exams. Miners worked long shifts. Cargo ships moved supplies between colonies. People complained about weather systems and traffic delays. No one realized they had become the center of endless discussions inside another civilization. Humanity had not changed because of alien attention. People simply continued living their lives. Ironically, that normal behavior confused the fleet even more. If humans truly possessed such industrial strength, why did they not act with arrogance? Why did their communication channels show humor, art, entertainment, and everyday concerns? Why did ordinary citizens seem more interested in sports and music than conquest? Nothing matched the Empire's expectations. The contradictions continued to grow. As days passed, sleep became rare inside command centers. Officers worked longer hours. Scientists requested more data. Analysts argued constantly. Some leaders still pushed for confidence. They reminded everyone that their technology remained superior. Their ships were advanced. Their experience was unmatched. They had conquered enormous distances. Surely they still held the advantage. But fewer voices supported that view. Because another question had started spreading. What if superiority on paper did not matter? History contained examples where numbers and technology had failed. Unexpected factors often changed everything. And humans seemed to specialize in unexpected factors. One report particularly disturbed the leadership. It focused on innovation. Human scientists, engineers, and inventors had repeatedly produced breakthroughs during emergencies. Under pressure, development accelerated. Solutions appeared where none had existed before. The report described humanity as highly adaptive. That single word bothered many commanders. Adaptive. Not strongest. Not smartest. Not most advanced. Adaptive. And sometimes, adaptation was more dangerous than raw power. As tension increased, mistakes began appearing inside the fleet itself. Minor navigation errors occurred. Supply requests became disorganized. Communication delays appeared between sectors. Nothing serious happened. But such mistakes were unusual. Confidence had always been one of the Empire's greatest strengths. Now uncertainty was creating problems. One commander privately admitted that fear had become contagious. Not panic. Not chaos. Just quiet fear. The kind that spread through unanswered questions. The kind that kept officers awake at night. The kind that made even simple decisions feel heavy. Several younger crew members requested transfers away from frontline vessels. Others became obsessed with studying human history. Libraries across the fleet saw record traffic. People wanted answers. And the more they learned, the stranger humanity appeared. Some became fascinated by old Earth stories. Stories of explorers. Stories of survival. Stories of people rebuilding after tragedies. Human culture was filled with hope, humor, and stubborn determination. One scientist spent weeks studying music and literature. He expected to discover signs of aggression. Instead, he found something unexpected. Dreams. Human stories constantly spoke about hope. About family. About sacrifice. About building a better future. Even during difficult times, people imagined brighter days. That optimism confused him. Many civilizations became cynical after suffering. Humans somehow protected hope itself. He included those observations in his report. At first, others dismissed it. But eventually, more researchers reached similar conclusions. Humanity's greatest strength might not be technology. It might be belief. Belief that tomorrow could be better. Belief that problems could be solved. Belief that failure was temporary. And perhaps that belief explained everything. Days later, another emergency meeting was called. This one involved only the highest-ranking leaders. Security levels increased. Entire sections of the fleet were blocked from communication. Something new had been discovered. The information came from long-range archives recovered during deeper scans. Very few people were allowed to see it. Even those attending the meeting looked uneasy. The classified report appeared on the central display. Silence filled the room. No one spoke for several minutes. Several commanders slowly leaned forward. Others simply stared. The report contained historical patterns nobody had expected. Again and again, when humanity faced threats, divisions disappeared. Rivals cooperated. Industries united. Ordinary citizens made sacrifices. People from different backgrounds worked together. Human history showed countless examples of cooperation appearing during moments of danger. The findings shocked many officers because their own civilization behaved differently. Internal competition often increased during crises. Humans seemed to do the opposite. Pressure brought them together. And that possibility frightened several leaders more than any hidden warship. One commander quietly closed the report. Another sat motionless. A third officer who had once demanded immediate action suddenly remained silent. Something had changed. The confidence that once defined the fleet was fading. Not because they had lost a battle. Not because they had suffered defeat. No shots had been fired. No fleets had collided. No worlds had been damaged. Yet doubt had spread everywhere, and doubt had become stronger than certainty. Outside the command vessel, thousands of ships continued drifting through space. From a distance, the armada still looked powerful, still organized, still unstoppable. But inside those ships, questions had replaced pride. And in the highest levels of command, an uncomfortable truth was beginning to emerge. Perhaps the greatest mistake an empire could make was not underestimating another civilization's weapons. Perhaps the greatest mistake was misunderstanding the people themselves. Then, near the end of the meeting, a sealed transmission arrived from the deepest intelligence archives. Only the Supreme Commanders possessed access. As the message opened, several faces changed immediately. One officer slowly stood up in disbelief. Another whispered something no one expected to hear. We may have judged them completely wrong. And suddenly, the future of two civilizations rested on whatever secrets remained inside that report. The sealed report changed everything. Inside the highest command chamber, no one spoke for several moments. The atmosphere felt heavier than ever before. Every leader present had already spent days questioning old assumptions, but the information now displayed before them was something entirely different. It was not a list of hidden weapons. It was not evidence of unknown technology. And it was not proof that humanity possessed some mysterious advantage. In many ways, the truth was far simpler and far more unsettling. The report focused on patterns, not machines, not fleets, people. Researchers had examined thousands of years of human history and discovered something unusual. Whenever humanity faced threats large enough to end civilization, something remarkable happened. People changed. Differences became less important. Rivals worked together. Communities supported one another. Industries transformed themselves. Scientists shared knowledge. Workers accepted sacrifices. Entire societies reorganized with surprising speed. Again and again, history showed the same pattern. Humanity became stronger during moments that should have destroyed it. One commander stared at the report and quietly admitted something he had never imagined saying. We prepared to measure their ships. Another finished the sentence. But we never measured their spirit. No one argued, because every page supported the same conclusion. The greatest mistake had not been underestimating human technology. It had been misunderstanding human nature. The meeting continued for hours. Different opinions filled the room. Some leaders still argued that retreat would show weakness. Their empire had ruled countless systems for centuries. Walking away from a mission was almost unthinkable. Others disagreed. Pride, they argued, should never replace wisdom. One elderly strategist, respected by everyone present, finally stood. He had witnessed hundreds of campaigns. He had studied civilizations that no longer existed. He had seen arrogance destroy empires. His voice remained calm. Confidence without understanding becomes blindness. The room fell silent. Nobody interrupted him. We believed humans were weak because they struggle. We believed they were divided because they disagree. We believed their history made them vulnerable. He paused. But perhaps we misunderstood what strength truly means. No one answered. Because deep inside, many commanders had reached the same conclusion. The invasion plans remained on the central display. Thousands of ships, countless calculations, years of preparation. All of it now felt strangely uncertain. Not because victory was impossible, but because nobody could predict what would happen afterward. And uncertainty frightened experienced leaders more than anything else. Far away, Life across human space continued normally. Children laughed inside classrooms. Families gathered for evening meals. Scientists worked inside research stations. Doctors cared for patients. Farmers monitored crops beneath artificial suns. Pilots transported supplies across vast distances. Most people had no idea that another civilization was debating their future. Nobody knew how close history had come to taking a very different path. Inside the alien fleet, however, change was already spreading. Officers who once spoke proudly about expansion now spoke carefully. Crew members spent more time studying humanity than fearing it. Libraries remained crowded. Documentaries about Earth became surprisingly popular. Researchers translated human books. Musicians analyzed songs. Scientists examined old inventions. The more they learned, the stranger humanity seemed. Not because humans were perfect. In fact, the opposite was true. Human history contained mistakes, failures, conflicts, losses, but somehow hope always survived. That fascinated many observers. One researcher became deeply interested in old photographs from Earth. He noticed something simple. People smiled, even during difficult periods, even after disasters, even when circumstances looked hopeless. Humans celebrated birthdays. They played games. They created art. They told jokes. They dreamed about tomorrow. That optimism seemed almost impossible to explain. Another scientist spent months studying human exploration. Generation after generation, people had looked toward the stars. Even when technology was primitive. Even when failure was common. They continued trying. Again and again. Not because success was guaranteed, but because curiosity pushed them forward. Those discoveries slowly changed opinions throughout the fleet. Fear began turning into respect. Questions replaced assumptions. And understanding slowly replaced fear. Eventually, the highest leaders gathered for one final meeting. No debates. No arguments. Everyone knew a decision had to be made. The room remained silent as the Supreme Commander reviewed the reports one last time. Thousands of pages. Centuries of observations. Endless simulations. The conclusion was simple. Humanity had been misunderstood. And acting on that misunderstanding could create consequences nobody could predict. After several long minutes, the order was finally given. All invasion preparations would stop. The fleet would withdraw. Silence filled the chamber. Not disappointment. Not anger. Relief. Several commanders closed their eyes. Others quietly nodded. No celebrations followed. No speeches. Only acceptance. Sometimes wisdom meant knowing when not to act. Across the massive armada, new instructions spread. Ships adjusted their courses. Navigation systems updated. Formation patterns changed. Thousands of vessels slowly turned away from human territory. There were no dramatic announcements. No final threats. No display of power. The fleet simply left. And humanity never even realized how close another civilization had come. Months later, news of the withdrawal spread across the empire. Citizens were confused. Military academies demanded explanations. Political leaders questioned the decision. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed secret weapons had forced the retreat. Others imagined ancient technologies. Wild stories appeared everywhere. But the truth remained classified. Only a small group of leaders knew the real answer. There had been no superweapon. No hidden army. No mysterious machine. Only a lesson about assumptions. Years passed. Curiosity about humanity continued growing. Other civilizations began studying Earth with greater interest. Diplomatic groups replaced military scouts. Researchers exchanged information. Trade discussions slowly began. Small steps led to larger relationships. For the first time, humanity met other intelligent civilizations not through war, but through conversation. People reacted with excitement. Scientists celebrated. Children dreamed bigger dreams. Artists created new works inspired by the discoveries. And ordinary citizens simply continued doing what humans had always done. Living, building, dreaming. As decades turned into centuries, the story became famous across the galaxy. Military schools studied it. Historians wrote books about it. Strategists examined every detail. Many called it one of the greatest intelligence failures in history. Not because information had been missing, but because understanding had been missing. Future generations often ask the same question. What exactly had frightened the fleet? And surviving commanders always gave similar answers. It was never fear of weapons or fear of technology. It was something far harder to explain. They had discovered that humans refused to stay broken. No matter how many times history challenged them, they adapted. No matter how many mistakes they made, they learned. No matter how difficult life became, they kept moving forward. That stubborn determination could not be measured by sensors. No computer could calculate it. No scan could fully understand it. And perhaps that was why confidence had shattered. Because the fleet had entered human space believing it understood everything. Then one scan forced them to face a truth they had never considered. Civilizations are not defined only by machines. They are defined by people. And people are unpredictable. Generations later, retired officers would gather and tell younger students about the event. Some still remembered the moment those first reports appeared. Others remembered the silence inside the command chambers. But nearly all of them agreed on one thing. The greatest surprise had not been discovering humanity's factories or ships. It had been discovering humanity itself. A species that argued. A species that failed. A species that stumbled. Yet somehow always stood back up. And in the end, without firing a single shot, without issuing a single threat, and without even knowing another civilization was watching, humanity had done something no enemy had ever accomplished. It had shattered an entire fleet's confidence forever. Not through fear, not through power, but through the simple truth of what humans had always been. Imperfect, hopeful, and impossible to underestimate.